A special thank you to OhioKAN, Ohio Kinship and Adoption Navigators program, for presenting this online learning session. We are grateful for your partnership with Kinship Caregivers Connect to bring information around the unique strengths and needs of kinship families to caregivers in Ohio. Hello, everyone. My name's Angela Tobin, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk about kinship families, what unique strengths and needs kinship families have. And there's so many strengths, but I hope if you're a caregiver watching this, you'll really be able to resonate with some of the caregivers we hear from today and just take this time to reflect on your own experiences as well. I do want to start with an affirmation. This is by Morgan Harper Nichols. We use her work a lot in our support group because I feel like it just resonates so much. So today, the affirmation to think about is, through all that has changed, perhaps it's not too late to consider the possibility of a future that can be beautiful and healing in its own unique way. So we will talk a lot today about how stepping into the role of a kinship caregiver can really change what you thought your life would look like. But I hope you can still find beauty and healing in the new family that you have. So this will be our roadmap for today. I really hope you can pause this video, think about your own experiences. We'll hear about some experiences of caregivers as well. I normally like to make this a discussion, but as much of a discussion and thinking it can be for you, so it's not just me talking the whole time. But our roadmap is understanding the unique experiences of kinship families, transitioning into a role of a caregiver, and what all the changes look like, including family dynamics, what your day-to-day life looks like. And then also, we can't talk enough about how many strengths there are for kinship caregivers and how much that can make a difference for the child that you're caring for. And finally, we'll talk about resources for support as well. I do want to share a little bit about my why first. Kinship care is very close to my heart. Just from my own experience, my grandparents raised my cousin for about 8 years, and then my parents stepped in to care for him for about 2 years. So I saw all of the joys and challenges that came along with that. Luckily, my cousin is doing very well in college, and I very much value being a part of his village any way that I can. But I definitely experienced how kinship care can impact the entire family. And it's just such an honor to work with so many amazing caregivers. I am the founder and leader of Kinship Caregivers Connect, which we'll share a little bit more about at the end of this presentation. I had the opportunity to give a TED Talk last year, which was really awesome. And this talks a little bit more about my why and why I started Kinship Caregivers Connect. What would you do for family? This is likely a question you've had to ask yourself at some point, and I've learned for kinship caregivers, the answer can completely change their life overnight. I saw the impact this question can have within my own family when my grandparents became kinship caregivers. A kinship caregiver is a relative who's not the birth parent of a child that takes on a primary caregiving role because the child's birth parents are unable to or need assistance in caring for them. This can be a grandparent, like within my own family, or aunts and uncles, cousins, siblings, even family friends. My grandparents began caring for their grandson, my cousin, full-time when he was 5. I really experienced what kinship care meant to its core in the last conversation I had with my grandma. Unfortunately, 8 years into caring for my cousin, she was dying of cancer, and I couldn't be home to be with her in person. So I called her on the phone, knowing this might be the last time we would talk. And really, the conversation didn't go as I expected it to. I thought we would share fond memories and last wishes. And although this came up, there is a different focus. That was making sure my cousin was taken care of. One of the last things she said to me on the phone was, "Make sure you order your cousin's school uniforms on time. Promise me." These seemingly mundane words are never meant to be last words said between heavy breaths, but the words of a younger parent. In that moment, it was clear what mattered most to my grandma, her caregiving role, She passed that on to my parents and my family, and I now consider my cousin my brother. Since this last conversation, there has been an echoing whisper in my ear, if not me, then who?
So this is my why of why I started Kinship Caregivers Connect, and just seeing how important kinship care was for my grandparents, literally up until their last moments, was inspiring for me, and wanting to support other kinship caregivers and also my parents as they stepped into this role. In terms of a definition of kinship caregiver, kinship care may not be a word that you've heard before, and that's okay. I know I've talked with many people, professionals and caregivers, and they've never heard the word before. But then when I describe it, they're like, oh, yeah, I know what that is, because kinship care can be so common. But the definition we have is a relative, a family friend, or really any person who has a pre existing relationship with the child that steps in as their primary caregiver. And it's when they're not the biological parent. So often they're stepping in for the biological parent or a big support to them. We'll give some examples in another slide, but the most common arrangement is a grandparent raising a grandchild, but certainly there's so many other types of kinship care as well. And just some statistics about kinship care. And I hope out of anything, this helps you to know you're not alone, and kinship care can be so common nationwide. And I will say these numbers are probably on the low end, because we don't really have a way of calculating how many kinship caregivers there are, since a lot of kinship caregivers are not part of the child welfare system, which we'll talk about. So I would say there's probably more than this. But yeah, kinship care is so common with families stepping in to care for children. So 8 million children nationwide are raised in kinship families. And out of this number, 2.5 million children are living in kinship families where the birth parent is not in the household. So it's just the child and the kinship caregiver. And then finally, in Ohio, about 117,000 children are living in kinship families. And like I said, I really think this number is higher. And I've already met so many kinship caregivers in the state. Something important to think about is comparing kinship caregivers that are in the child welfare system versus those who are not. And I think this can really be an equity issue for support, since the most financial support is through the child welfare system, but also being in the child welfare system can be, a challenge and not preferred by everyone. But just knowing, in Ohio, for every one child raised by kinship families, um, in Ohio, for every one child raised by a kinship caregiver in the foster system, there are 34 children being raised by a kinship caregiver outside of the foster system. So many kinship families are not a part of the foster system, and a lot of the sports they rely on are like public benefit supports, not specific to child welfare. So there is such a need for these supports for kinship families. I think another interesting statistic is that kinship families save the child welfare system $7 billion per year, since they aren't receiving the same supports. So I'm super passionate, policy wise and advocacy, that no matter how kinship caregivers and their children come together, that support can be so helpful, especially when this isn't something you were expecting to do. Here are some different examples of kinship families. It's definitely not an exhaustive list. We have grandparents raising grandchildren, which is the most common type of kinship relationship, but certainly there's so many others. Aunts and uncles raising nieces and nephews, family friends, cousins, siblings, great grandparents, great aunt and uncles. Sometimes I've heard like my best friend's kids or my best friend's nephews, cousin, like very far relationships. But the important thing about kinship care is you knew that child ahead of time. I also think it's important to think that this changes your relationship with the birth parent as well, because you often know the birth parent too. So if you're a grandparent, the birth parent might be your son or daughter. If you're aunt or uncle, that's your sibling, so on and so forth. So these relationships can change, especially when we talk about family dynamics later on. But just to say, kinship care can look different. And even it doesn't necessarily have to be a child living with a caregiver full time. but my grandparents cared for us on the weekends, and that's an example of kinship care. So you can think about times that family members have stepped in for you as well. A great thing about kinship care is there's so much diversity within kinship families. And thinking about the roots of kinship care, before kinship care even was a term, why did family members have to step in? You know, it could have been reasons related to immigration or even slavery, or, families moving or parents getting sick. Kinship care has been a part of history by necessity, with caregivers coming from different backgrounds and there being so many historical roots to kinship care. Research does tell us that kinship caregivers are more likely to be from communities of color, such as Black and African American and Native American communities. There is also equity components to kinship care that point to the importance of supports, such as financial supports. Kinship caregivers are more likely to be single and from low income communities. They're also more likely to be female. So there's a lot of different identities that kinship caregivers hold that affect their, interactions with the world and also the supports available to them. But the beauty of kinship care is there's so much diversity, and a family can really step in to be a village to a child, which is historical and so meaningful. So it's amazing to think about, but also a call for more supports. There is such a range of experiences in kinship care in so many ways. Legal is just another one. And I know I've heard that the legal process can be really stressful. There's a lot of feelings of it being out of control. It can be expensive. You might even have to take your family members to court. So it's a big process and it can look different for everyone. Um, and legal custody also has, a determination on what decisions you can make for child. There's first, some families might not have legal custody, or they might be in the process of getting legal custody. I know my grandparents and my parents never had legal custody because my cousin's mom was involved and able to sign the forms and things necessary, but there are barriers in accessing supports here. There's private custody, where a family member might go outside of the child welfare system, so they go to domestic courts to get custody and trying to step in because they see the need. And sometimes this can be a agreement between the birth parent and caregiver, or shared custody can be an option too. In other cases, the child welfare system is involved. So, for example, the child welfare system may remove the child from the birth parent's home and take them into child welfare custody and then choose you as a caregiver, or they may place the child with you through a safety plan. But the child welfare system being involved can be really important. At times, it can be really overwhelming too. It's very important to know what your options are, and caseworkers working with you should be clear in what the options are given to you when the child welfare system is involved. You may get emergency or temporary custody, and sometimes during this time, the reunification might be trying to occur to see if that's a possibility. And then permanent custody may occur down the line, and this is when the child is placed with you permanently through custody. And sometimes this is where the child welfare system involvement ends. There's also KinGap, which is a new program in Ohio, which is a way of getting continued support from the child welfare system as a kinship caregiver in a permanent placement. So this would occur if you get licensed as a foster parent when you step in as a kinship caregiver, which should be given an option when the child welfare system is involved. And then 6 months after caring for them as a foster parent, you can apply for guardianship assistance and become a legal guardian to the child. And there is also adoption, which is not on here, which is a permanent placement where you fully adopt the child you're caring for as your own child, and that terminates the birth parent's rights. So there's so many different options that can affect so many different things. I recommend consulting a lawyer or legal supports if you have questions. I know legal aid is available based on income, but this is just all to say, even the legal arrangement you have with the child in your care can change what you're able to do as a caregiver and the supports available to you. These are examples of different ways that a child and even your own relationship can differ with a birth parent. We talk a lot about caregivers' relationships with birth parents in our support group because it can be something full of so many different emotions in terms of your relationship with the birth parent and the child's relationship with the birth parent and walking them through that. So it's a really big topic, and it's something that makes kinship care unique because you have that shared history with the birth parent. If they're your child, your sibling, however they're connected to you and working through that, it can be a challenge, it can be a strength, and I think it can also change. So these are none like set in stone. It's a spectrum, and even the birth parent's involvement in the child's life can change over time. Thinking about, if it's a positive relationship, if it's a strained relationship between you and the birth parent too, kind of that quality is a factor as well. So sometimes the birth parents can live in the home and it's a multi-generational living situation, which can be a great support. Sometimes if the birth parents lives in the home, there can be issues with boundaries. So either of these can go either way. The parent shares a caregiving responsibility. An example of this is if the child goes to the parent's house on the weekends. I've heard there's an adjustment period sometimes going from the birth parent's house to the caregiver's house, but that can be a great source of respite. The parent might have visits with the child, whether that's supervised or unsupervised. Sometimes that's court ordered. Sometimes that's up to you as a caregiver. And this can be a great positive so they can connect with their birth parents. But again, there can be an adjustment period for the child and for you as well. A great strength of kinship care is children are more likely to stay connected and in contact with their birth parents because that child will always have that feeling in them and wanting to know where they came from and who their parents are. So when they do get to know them and it's a healthy situation, it can be a great strength. However, other times birth parents may have limited contact or rarely connect with the child. They may have contact at some point and then be inconsistent, or they may just call them on special occasions. But knowing that the birth parent situation, their mental health, or their financial stability, whatever it is, as that changes, their relationship with the child can change too. And sometimes the birth parents aren't able to be involved, whether they choose not to, whether they've passed away, or they're just not able to because of their mental health or substance use, whatever the reason is. So this can also change family to family, and I know it can be a great stressor navigating that relationship. Hopefully there can be some professional supports or mediation or family therapy available to help navigate it. But just knowing this can be difficult, and it's important to recognize your feelings here too. And hopefully everyone has the child's best interest in mind when trying to work together. Now, something we'll discuss is what it was like to transition into your role as a caregiver, because it can be such a life change, and we're going through it and we're in survival mode. We're just doing what we need to do to get through, but really taking the time to look back and see all that has changed. And there's a lot of positives, of course, but also challenges too. So leaving space for it all. So in this video, I describe just some ways that a kinship caregiver's life can change overnight. And I'm inviting the audience to think about ways, like if they were put in this situation, what could change? So maybe as you're listening, you can think of anything that resonates from this video of things that have changed for you.
But I want to challenge these viewpoints and invite you all into the perspective of a caregiver with the question: what wouldn't you do for a child who would otherwise enter foster care? So let's say it's any old day, you get a phone call, the person on the other end of the line says, you need to get here right away, there's been a family emergency and there's kids involved. You drop what you're doing, drive there as fast as you can, knowing your grandchildren are there, your nieces and nephews are there, or your siblings. When you get there, you're met by a police officer or a caseworker, and they say to you, the children have experienced neglect, seems like the parents are struggling with substance use disorder or mental health challenges, or there's been a domestic violence dispute. No matter the cause, the worker says to you, you either need to take these kids into your care now or they're going to enter the foster system. In that moment, you know what you have to do. You pack the kids into the car, everything you can into a laundry basket, and start driving home. This is day one. And although you can't see the road ahead, you know you're doing what's best. But really, your life gets turned upside down completely overnight. You now have 1, 2, 3 new children in their home. You're rearranging furniture and buying new beds. If you're caring for infants or toddlers, you're back on diaper duty and bottle feedings and that whole fun schedule. If you're caring for older kids, you're working to enroll them into school and extracurriculars. You're getting everyone into therapy and doctor's appointments. You find your schedule quite busy. And also, you have to learn to parent again and parent differently, knowing these children have experienced trauma and they're showing different behaviors. You can't be the fun relative who spoils the kids and gives them back at the end of the day. Now, 24/7, it's your job to make sure these children's needs are met. Financially, you didn't plan for these kids. If you're working and planning to retire, you have to keep working and take out of your retirement or add on a second job. And if you don't make enough to cover childcare, you might have to quit your job completely and stay at home with the kids. This also takes a toll on your relationships. If you're married or in a long-term partnership, you don't have that quality time with your partner like you used to. And you notice that your friends start to fade in the background too. A lot of them can't understand the situation you're in. And quite honestly, you don't have the time or energy to socialize with them either. Your family dynamics also change. Some family members support you, others don't. You really want to support the child's birth parent who's struggling, but ultimately you feel like you have to put the children first. And it's heartbreaking having to bring the child's birth parent, your own relative, to court and testify against them for custody. All of this is a long, expensive, and draining process. It starts to take a toll on your physical health and your mental health. You start to feel isolated, alone, and even ashamed of the situation. You don't know where to turn for support. Phew, that was a lot for me to talk about. I'm sure it was a lot for you to think about. But imagine as a caregiver, this is your day-to-day reality.
And after listening to that, I do want you to take a second and invite you to think about why you did step into this role. Was it something you had planned for your life? Were you doing this really for the child and for their future? So take a second to think about that, because it's not always expected. And a lot of times it is for that child in care who you're connected to. And that can be such a strength of kinship care. And if you are thinking about that time when the child came into your care and what that was like, it can be such a crisis situation that happens overnight, and it can be a lot to process. But as you're going through it, you might be in survival mode. But this is all to say to leave grace for yourself, and also realizing that there may be healing along the line too. And when children come into kinship care, often it's because there's been a traumatic situation for the child and for the family. But just to realize this isn't only impacting the child, but it's a difficult situation for the birth parent and for you as a caregiver. Stepping into this role, you may not have time, supports, or any preparation. We'll hear from Tangie talking about how she went to sign the documents the next night and then went to court the next week, and it all just happened so fast. She was willing to do what she had to step in, but that was difficult, and she didn't even have childcare available to her. In kinship care, it's kind of backwards because you get the kids and then figure it out, where sometimes in foster care, you go through training ahead of time. You know exactly when you're going to welcome a child in your home. Sometimes, like, you have the decision to say yes or no. But for kinship care, it can just be so rapid. And that's part of the survival mode in the beginning. I think something else important is that caregiving isn't often part of a caregiver's life plan. They didn't think they'll be raising another child in their 60s or 70s. Maybe they're planning to retire, or they have birth parent or other children, and they're really wanting to focus on those children. And that's kind of what they saw for their life. So a lot of times kinship caregivers don't say yes because they're looking to be a caregiver, but because of that child and their loyalty towards that child. There can also be such a big change in family roles and hierarchy, which we'll talk about, going from the grandparent to the primary parent as an example, and how that even changes your relationship with the birth parent. There's a lot of emotions that can occur with little time or capacity to process them. We'll have a section of this training just dedicated to thinking about all those different types of emotions. Granted, like, you won't process them all now, but I do encourage you to find ways to process them, because when you don't, they just keep getting pushed down and they might come up another way. So it is important to recognize the range of feelings that you can feel because of everything that changes unexpectedly and all of the things that you navigate on a daily basis. So I do invite you, if you can remember, or if you want to go back there, it's optional, but thinking about what your life was like before you stepped into your caregiving role as a kinship caregiver. So you can think about what your relationship was like with other family members, what your job life was like. Were you really into your career and growing? Were you working full time, or were you planning to retire and really excited about that? What were your leisure and hobbies? Did you have other caregiving roles? Maybe you were just the babysitter for your niece or nephew, or, occasionally stepped in as a caregiver, and how your own well being was before stepping into this role. And I know some of you all have been in it for a long time, so it might be going back, but just thinking about what that was like for you. And this graphic is just to show becoming a caregiver can change so much. And I've heard from some caregivers in our group that they kind of felt like they lost their identity in the process because the role can be so overwhelming, just trying to do everything for the child in your care every day. You feel like you lose yourself a little bit. We'll have a presentation from Yaya, and Yaya is actually what her grandsons call her, and she's kind of adopted that as her name because she's felt like it's become so much part of her identity now. And she says sometimes it's hard to remember who Latrice was, which is her name, and referring to who she was before being a kinship caregiver. These are some ways that your life can change. Some of them were mentioned in the TEDx talk I just showed, but navigating the legal process, really putting the supports in place for your child's well-being. And sometimes you have to catch up on doctor's appointments for them, get all of the therapies in place if they have higher needs. And we do know that children in kinship care are more likely to have increased needs, especially considering that they have experienced trauma, whether that's like mental health or experiencing disabilities. So then you may also have to navigate the education system, getting them enrolled in school, but also getting them the necessary supports in place and connecting with their teachers and educators. Financial stability can be so huge, and a lot of caregivers in our group share like we weren't financially ready for this, and adding on a child, things are expensive, especially with inflation now. And when you're not able to meet your basic needs comfortably, that can be another source of stress. The birth parents involvement, which we discussed previously, and even how the rest of the family dynamics might change. And then finally we get to your well-being, which it's a small circle on here, and a lot of times it can be left on the back burner, but it's really important to pour into yourself, remembering that you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you burn out, that will really affect your ability to care for the child you're caring for. Something Dr. Crumley says is you must be okay for the children you care to be okay. We will have a training on self-care that I recommend watching if you're wanting to learn more strategies. But this is just a picture to show how things can change when you step into that role, and really change so quickly too. In this video, Tangie, who's a caregiver in Kinship Caregivers Connect, shares her story of what it was like getting her grandson into her care, just how drastic the change was. I think she uses the term a rigor mortar moment where everything just really hit her. I invite you to listen and hear Tangie's story. And I just want to say thank you so much, Tangie, for your honesty and your bravery in sharing.
Hello, my name is Tangie Taylor. I'm raising my grandson. He's 8. I've had him since he was 2. It's been a long journey. First got him, I was in shock. Phone rang, middle of the night, 11, 12 o'clock. It's the local hospital where we lived, and saying my daughter had been put in the hospital from seizure. She's epileptic, so starting on my way to the hospital, the ex-husband calls and said, apparently Matt's on some kind of medication or drugs of some sort. And it was just shaking my world. It was just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Where's my grandson at? And I guess she was with Matt. So I call Matt and I say, Matt, I'm getting ready to leave the hospital. Can I come pick up King? Because I know you're not used to watching him and everything. Before I left there, the caseholders were like, "What? You can't take him." And I said, "Well, I'd already took to his dad, and he's willing to give him to him instead of him having to show up with a bunch of sheriff department and traumatize my grandson. Let's just, do it that way and let me get him." And they said, "Okay, once you get him, you have to come to the Warren County Sheriff's Department." So that's what I did. And then that was a big rigmarole. It's late at night. I've got a 2-year-old, diapers, nothing, just, it was just, I'm trying to settle down about my daughter. He was my grandson, but I wasn't used to keeping him every day. So you got a lot of stress there going on. And it's like, okay, now what? So I get to the sheriff's department and they've got children's services there. And they said, "You can take him. We're going to have you sign these papers that you will be in court." This was Friday evening. "We're going to be in court on Tuesday morning and you'll have to appear before the judge." It's like, okay. I had to find a babysitter last minute, and that was, I'm not used to all that. We go in front of the judge, and he said, "I'm going to give emergency custody to the child's grandmother." And that's where we began our journey. I had a job at that time, but now I'm going to go to work. I don't have a permanent babysitter. So anyway, I called my job and I said, "Look, I'm going to have to take some time off. I've got an emergency situation in my family." I didn't know what to do next. And it ended up being a day by day, everything came together, and it's so much better now. Having him every day, I think, can I do this? I'm a grandma age, not a mom age.
Something that can get overlooked in kinship care that's really huge is that family dynamics piece that I mentioned, and realizing that it's not only just your child and your relationship with the child you're caring for that changes, but the entire family dynamics change. Even like the hierarchy and who your loyalties are to, and you have to adapt to this, but this is such a strength too, and how you're able to adapt to really prioritize the child you're caring for. So this is an example of a family before a child comes into kinship care. So we have the grandparents, then under that, the aunts and uncles, the child's birth parent, who are all the children of the grandparents, and then the child in care under that. So you can see everyone's connections there. And when a child comes into kinship care, how do you think their position in this family tree to say moves? Up, down, side to side? It can move up because for a grandparent stepping in, now that child becomes from their grandchild to their child. So they might have similar loyalties as they would as their other children, such as the child's birth parent and the child's aunts and uncles. Something that grandparents share in our group is they grieve the loss of that role of the grandparent who can, spoil the kids and give them back at the end of the day, where now you're that primary caregiver. And that's a sad loss because a lot of people wait a long time to be a grandparent. And it might also change your relationship with your other grandchildren who you're not the full-time caregiver for. And they might not understand why you're spending so much time with their cousin, or why they might not be getting the same treatment because you are the primary parent figure. And maybe the other children you have who are the children in care's aunts and uncles, they might be of support. They might not be of support, so they can have differing opinions too. So this is just an example of how the family tree can change. And I saw this when my grandparents took in my cousin. I understood why they had a different level of energy and loyalty towards him, because he was pretty much their kid. Something else that can happen is sometimes there might be a split loyalty where you feel like you have to choose between the child in your care and the child's birth parents. And if you're the grandparent, then maybe the birth parents feel like they're a little lower on the tree now, and in terms of who your loyalty and energy is going towards. And that can be really hard for them too. So these dynamics can change, but it does put you in a difficult position, sometimes really having to choose the child in care first over other family members in order to keep them safe and to keep going for yourself as a caregiver. But when a foster parent steps in who's not a relative, these dynamics don't exist in the first place because there's no pre-existing relationship or history. So this just adds another layer. But like I said, it can be such a strength with the birth parent staying involved. We'll go over another example of how a family tree and family dynamics can change if you're stepping in as the aunt and uncle. So again, this might be the family tree to start. And as an aunt and uncle, maybe you have your own children who are the child's cousins. But we'll see how it shifts with a kinship care dynamic. So when the aunt and uncle step in as primary caregivers, now their children and the child in care are living together. So they may have more of a sibling relationship, and you have to split your energy between everyone in your household. And then also, as an aunt or uncle, you're the sibling to the child's birth parents. And that can be a different dynamic. I know I've seen that in my own family, and that can present its own challenges. And then the grandparents might be, if they're still in the picture, connected to the child's birth parents and to you. But all to say that this can drastically change the dynamics in the household. Now, I invite you to take some time to reflect on how you feel about your role as a kinship caregiver. What transitions did you have to make? What changes occurred in your family and your family dynamics? And as I mentioned earlier, there can be so many feelings that come along when stepping into this role. So, as an invitation, you can start to think about this on your own, or you can think about it with others if you want supports to talk it through. But we will hear from Yaya and really how her life changed and all of the feelings that she has felt throughout. In this video, Yaya from Kinship Caregivers Connect shares some of her story and kind of all of the emotions that she's experienced in this role. It's very touching to hear how much care she has for her grandsons, but also it's really amazing to see her be honest in all of the different feelings and the challenges as well. So I just really want to thank Yaya for sharing her story. And what I love about Yaya is I think her sharing about her struggles gives other people permission to realize, like, okay, yeah, this is really hard, but it is worth doing and taking on every day. And you can watch the full video on our YouTube page.
My name is Yaya. That's what I go by. I'm a kinship caregiver, and I've been a kinship caregiver since 2018. You know, a lot of people don't know what kinship caregivers are, but I'm a living testimony. I am a grandmother raising my grandkids. I took on the role because their parents cannot do it for whatever reason. So I took on that role to take care of them. I took in my two grandsons at the age of 4 and 6. It was a life-changing event for me. Because the everyday hustle and bustle of being a kinship caregiver, taking care of our grandkids, it's hard. It's hard.
When I first got to Yaya's house, it was like a big change. Like when I was like 6 years old, it was like just a big transition. Like,
how did you feel?
Like, I wanted to be with my mom.
It's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's hard. Glad I got things.
We do it because we want the best for our grandsons. We want the best for our grandkids. And we want them to be safe, and we want them to be happy and healthy. Our kids come to us hurt, neglected, abused. We're trying to repair them. Some of our grandkids are coming to us with so much going on. Mine came to me from homelessness. So in my mind, my grandkids would never be homeless again. This house that we're in doing this will be their house when I'm gone. I never want my grandkids to experience homeless again. You know, that being a kinship caregiver is, if I could put it in one word, it's not one word, because there's so many emotions and feelings. For me, I have good days and bad days. So let me tell you a little about in the beginning. In the beginning, yes, I had a job, but I tried to get food stamps to feed the kids and childcare to continue to work. I made too much money, so I didn't qualify for anything. No food stamps, no childcare. And I did the best I could from 2018 to 2020. And in 2020, I walked away from my job of 15 plus years to really go hands-on and take care of my grandkids. So I had to get beds for the kids. I had to get clothes for the kids. I had to get doctors and dentists for the kids. I had to get them in school. I had to get surgery for the kids because some of them just had things going on with them. So just a lot of hands-on to take care of them. And yes, they're thriving. They're in school. They're thriving. But for me, it's just, I'm half of a century trying to raise kids in today's generation is really, really hard. Trying to get support. I don't get support. When I say support, I mean from job and family services, money, food stamps, insurance, to take care of these kids. Because I didn't need none of that, but I needed to take care of these kids. And, it's just really hard trying to get those things to take care of the kids. And it's always a struggle and a fight to get the services that you need to take care of these kids. Because if they was in the system, those people would get that with no problem whatsoever. I did go back to work, but also understand that I had to take on a job that dealt with work-life balance because I still have to take care of these kids. And one of my grandsons do have ADHD, and I have to be available because at any given time I could get a call from the school saying, come pick him up, because his behavior does not allow him to stay at school if he have an episode. Along the line, I did have to pull out my retirement because we didn't have no money. And so right now, I don't even have a retirement if I wanted to even retire, because I had to take it out a year after I worked to continue to take care of my household. The lack of support. And when we say support, we mean childcare, food stamps, housing. Housing is a big issue for a lot of us grandparents. Resources out there, and then trying to get the resources. Just as recently as this month, my food stamps was cut off because they didn't do their job, not because what I didn't do, because I know I always do what I got to do to take care of them, but I had to fight. I'm not even sure who I was fighting with to try to get the food stamps back to feed the kids. There's so many hurdles that us grandparents got to go through. So now, as I'm moving forward in my life, I have to take into consideration the little people that I'm taking care of, and making sure that when I'm gone, that they still would be okay. So that's something that I didn't even think I had to deal with, but I do have to deal with. It does take a toll on me. I battle depression. I'm angry. I'm mad. I'm resentful, not at them, but just at the situation, because this is so hard. See, I'm about to start crying. It's just so hard taking care of these kids, and it just hurts so bad. And not everybody understands that, no, I don't want to do this. That doesn't mean that I don't love them, but I know I have to take care of them. So I suck it up, and I do what I do to take care of them so they can be the best that they can be. I love them with all my heart. And I hope as they get older that they remember their Yaya. They remember what Yaya did for them so they can be the best that they can be. Honestly, I don't know where I'd be if I didn't have a support group, because not everybody understands. In the beginning, it was always, my mom. Then I got involved in a support group called Kinship Caregivers Connect, and that support group really, really, really helped a lot, because I met so many different other caregivers from different zip codes, and we just bonded as a family, and we don't feel alone, because we do feel alone. We feel alone. Nobody understands our emotions and feelings. They think we're being negative, but we're not being negative. We're just as much as a human as the next person, just trying to do something that we wasn't prepared to do, that we wasn't ready to do, that we don't know how to do, but we're doing the best way we can. To be able to talk to someone that is going through the same thing, where we can vent, cry, worship, and pray, and understand each other, helped a lot. And along the line, I did have to get therapy. I had to get a therapist to help manage my feelings and thoughts. So between the support from family, the support group, and the therapist, that's what keep me above. It keeps me from falling over the ledge, if that makes sense. Is what helps me continue doing what I do and taking care of these grandkids. I cry every night. I know once I tell people that, and I think my grandkids think I be lying too, but no, I cry every night. And my crying is my worship. My crying is getting whatever emotions and feelings that I have in here and in here out of me, because I hurt. I'm human. I hurt. This hurts. It hurts. I love them, but it hurts. Now what I say is, I know this process is hard, but I got this. Just keep telling yourself you got this. Because if you didn't have it, somebody else would, and they wouldn't be taken care of in the way that we're taken care of. So just know that you got this. Regardless, just know that you got this.
These are just some words to describe some feelings that might come up being a caregiver and in doing a support group over time. I've just heard so many times, like, there's so many feelings at once that you can feel, such as you can feel grateful and really glad that you're able to step in for your child and really fulfilled in your relationship with them, but you can feel really frustrated at the same time navigating all of the different systems. You might feel angry that the child's birth parents put you in this situation, but at the same time, feel really connected to the child and really content with the relationship that you have with them. So there can be a lot of different feelings that exist at once. And I really like Yaya's video when she is so open about that. Just the main takeaway is it's okay to feel all the feelings and a range of feelings. What's helpful is to have others to process it with so you don't hold it inside, because it can come up somewhere or another at some point. So just know that you're not alone in these feelings. In the video with Yaya, she shared some of the things that have helped her along the way, and as she says, kept her above. So we all need those things that keep us above. So I really invite you to think about who in your life is a support right now, or who could be a support. And if you don't have people like you feel like you can talk to about your situation with, but you want that, maybe finding a support group or maybe finding a therapist, making sure you have the supports in your life to keep you going. And so you know that you're not alone and you can feel understood by others. And I heard that is hard. It's different talking with others who have been through it. It's a different level of understanding and support. You are welcome to join Kinship Caregivers Connect if you're in Ohio. We do meet twice a week, and I'll share a little bit about that. I want to end with talking about the strengths of kinship care. And obviously, there's a reason for every one of you doing this, and that's to give your children a better future and to help them to thrive. The good news is, research shows that children do better in kinship care compared to foster care, and there's a lot of positive outcomes. For this reason, it's seen as the best option when children can no longer live with their birth parents. And there actually is a federal law that the child welfare system must first seek out kinship families before placing a child in foster care. Here are some of the outcomes for children in kinship care. They generally experience higher stability, so caregivers are likely to stay with them for long periods of time. And this can help their feelings of safety, their feelings of connection to you. They also show increased mental health and school-related outcomes. Kinship care can really be a healing process for everyone. And finally, kids are more likely to stay connected to their family culture, their family traditions, and they're also more likely to stay living with their siblings as well. So as you're going through every day and facing all of the challenges, just remember that kids living with you as a kinship caregiver can make such a difference. And I've seen it for my cousin now that he's older. He's 19 and he's doing really well in college. But certainly in the moment, sometimes it's really hard to see. So I hope this is encouraging to see what some of the research shows too. These are some of the strengths that kinship families provide as put together by Dr. Joseph Crumbly. So there's attachment, a sense of legacy, which is a child feeling connected to their family over time, knowing what their family history is. And also you as a caregiver working to break cycles. I love what Yaya said, like, my grandchildren will never be homeless again like my child. So that's a family cycle that she wants to break. A sense of identity, of knowing who they are and who they came from, and you really being able to share about their birth parents and other family members so they continue to feel connected to their family, because children will always want to know where they came from and who their parents are, even if they're not currently in the picture. A sense of healing and healing together from an event that a lot of times could be traumatic, as I mentioned, for everyone involved. So using that as an opportunity to heal together. Adapting to the changing family dynamics and really finding sources of support, and just your ability to really change your life overnight for a child. And finally, if co-parenting is an option, having the birth parent involved, which can be such a positive thing when it's able to be done in a healthy way. So here are just some of the strengths of kinship care. I invite you to think about what your own strengths are as a caregiver and how you've seen, the journey progress for you and the child you're caring for. To end on a positive and really focusing on all of the strengths you all have as caregivers, I want to share another snippet from Tangie's story, where she shares how she's Team Kane and what motivates her to keep going every day.
I don't know how I would have done it without knowing that there's a reason I'm doing this, and this is my whole purpose. I have to admit, sometimes me and the Lord, I got to do what? I don't even want to do this. And it's not because we don't love our children. If we didn't love our grandchildren and our children, we wouldn't even try to involve and get custody and take emergency custody. But where would these kids be without us? And I mean, Kane's become my life and my child. He's my child. He's mine. I mean, and I'm responsible for it now. And it's been 6 years. Somebody asked me, that's not associated with the situation, what do you do? Asking kind of what you do for a living. I say, Team Kane, that's what I do. It gets easier, guys, as the time goes on. And you figure out it's going to be okay. And no matter what, it'll be okay. We'll still have a roof over our head, and we'll know what to do when the time comes. So take it a day at a time. Try to get faith and surround yourself with a team of people that understand and know what to do if you do have an emergency and who to contact.
I did want to share a little bit about our organization, Kinship Caregivers Connect. If you're a caregiver in Ohio and you're looking for more support with other kinship caregivers, you're welcome to join. I'll show our website so you can see about our meeting times and how to sign up. But we do hope to be a resource to you, whether that's just resources on our website or actually joining a support group meeting. So if you go to our website, kinshipcaregiversconnect.com, you can learn more about us, and here you can put in your name, your email, your phone number, and where you live in Ohio. And then from there, I'll reach out to you and, talk with you one-on-one, see how we can support you. And we do meet weekly, twice a week online. So we also have our schedule on our website. So you can see we have some open discussions, and we also have presentations like this at our group as well. So we meet Thursdays, 6:30 to 7:45 p.m., and Tuesdays 11:30 to 12:45 p.m. We also have a really awesome resource page with tons of different resources. So this is the public benefits presentation I mentioned earlier, and you can download presentation materials. So definitely check out our website if you haven't already. And you can reach out to my email as well at any time. I do want to thank OhioKAN for presenting this training and for their partnership over the years. They're a Kinship and Adoption Navigators program. So if you have not contacted OhioKAN and you're a kinship caregiver, I definitely recommend contacting them, and you can work with someone one-on-one to get you the supports that you need and see what supports you're eligible for. So this is their number, Monday through Friday. And then this is their website too, if you want to learn more about what they do. And their hours are 8:30 to 6:30 p.m. And then finally, if you're wanting more mental health support and maybe looking for a therapist, this is a great website, Psychology Today. You can just put your zip code in and then select. It will show up therapists in your area. What I really like is you can choose like what insurance company you have, what type of therapy, and then it will even further give you a list and then say if people are accepting clients or have a wait list. So I definitely recommend this resource for finding professional support if that's something you're interested in. So thank you all so much for this presentation and for your time. I hope you learned something, and I hope you can know that you're not alone again and take some time to think about all that you've gone through and really all of your strengths as well, and everything that you're doing for the children in your care.